Hey everyone, John Heath here again for Milton Rose Learning with another Let's Learn video on A Handmaid's Tale, the key characters. So in today's session we're going to obviously give a quick overview of the main characters. Then we will have a quick look at different interpretations of the characters, so how they were looked at the time in Ronald Reagan's kind of era and in the modern era, because interpretations have changed over time. And then we will have a very quick look at a characterization journey, so how characters evolve over the kind of novel. So let's dive in then. So first off, we'll look at a very quick who's who. Just give you a very quick overview of the key characters for anybody who is just starting studying the book. So first one has got to be really Offred. So she is a handmaid, like a new female social class that they've kind of created in Gilead. And she's forced into silent obedience, but she's quietly defiant. She kind of goes against the system in some ways. She represents memory, survival, and also the cost of oppression, because she tries to fight back in her own way against the Republic of Gilead. Then we have Serena Joy. So she's kind of like a bitter, powerful wife of the commander, but she's trapped by patriarchy that she once promoted. So she's a symbol of internalized misogyny, that's kind of woman-hating society, and feminine complicity. She kind of keeps that misogyny going even though she's a woman herself. So she's a bit of a murky kind of figure in the novel, quite interesting to tease out in debates in class. Okay, then we have Commander Waterford, or just the commander. The commander is Offred's owner, because there are elements of kind of pseudo-slavery in this book. Polite yet predatory, so he's a figure of patriarchal hypocrisy and coercive power. He controls Offred's destiny, effectively, but under a veil of politeness, as you'll see when you read the text, but he's not a very nice character. Then we have Nick Blaine. So that is the commander's chauffeur or driver, and he is an influential eye, effectively like a secret police almost. Mysterious and morally grey, he blurs the lines between ally, lover and threat. You never really know where you stand with Nick Blaine, so he's quite a very interesting ambivalent character to tease out, and you do get into some interesting debates in class about him. Then we've got Moira. So Moira is Offred's rebellious friend. I quite like Moira, quite an interesting character. Once defiant, but she was later broken. But nevertheless, she's a symbol of resistance and its limits. You know, you can resist in this kind of society, but never for too long. They'll eventually track you down and break you or erase you, effectively. Aunt Lydia. So she's the enforcer of Gilead's rules, cold, devout, quite nasty to be honest. She embodies how regimes weaponize women against each other. So they divide and rule and get women to kind of indoctrinate other women, so it keeps a system kind of going. Okay, and then just Janine, or Offwarren, as her name, her state name is. Fragile, traumatized, her descent shows the psychological toll of Gilead's cruelty. She shows the price that women have to pay in this kind of Gileadian totalitarian nightmare. Okay, very negative experience that she has. Okay, now, if we look here, we have a nice table which we're just going to quickly whiz you through here. Where we have the characters. So we've got Offred first, and then the book was written in the Ronald Reagan era, when he was president of America, and they saw the characters very differently than a modern reader, because obviously a lot has changed and our consciousness has evolved, if we put it that way. So it's very good when you're writing your essays to kind of talk about an era, a reader at the time, a contemporary reader, and then a more modern reader, and how the interpretations have changed with characters. Very interesting. So Offred in the Reagan era was seen as a passive victim of totalitarianism, a cautionary tale about extremism, very simplistic in some ways. But times have changed, and so a modern reader, if you have a look there, she's become almost a symbol of silent resistance, but also with the development of feminist thinking, a kind of female victim under surveillance from a hostile patriarchal system. So the interpretation has definitely moved on there, and I think that's interesting for you to note. Then the second one is Serena Joy. So in the Reagan era on the left, you have hypocritical architect of her own oppression. She's stupid and she kind of creates these walls around herself, and we can't have any sympathy. But a more modern reader on the right would see her as a complex villain. It's internalised misogyny. She's been indoctrinated to believe this misogyny and patriarchy, and she's complicit in the power structure. She's that wrapped up in them now that she can't escape. So a more modern reader might be a bit more sympathetic to Serena Joy. Then the commander, as you can see there, on the left in the Reagan era, he was seen as patriarchal authority figure, seemingly rational, but morally quite hollow and not a very nice guy. However, as we've had kind of more liberal thinking in the modern era, he's now seen as an embodiment of toxic masculinity, you might say, in the modern era, and exploitation masked as civility. He looks really nice on the surface, but he's really a predator, and a more modern, nuanced interpretation of him would tease that out now. Okay, we're just better readers, potentially. Our kind of skills advance as society advances. Nick Blaine. So on the left, in a Reagan era reading, a mysterious male saviour, possible romantic hope, who knows. But in the modern era, we're a bit more cynical. He's become an ambiguous figure. He raises questions about trust, complicity, and ultimately power. Can we trust anybody? Can we truly know anybody, as our psychoanalytical kind of interpretations get better in the modern era? Moira, in the Reagan era on the left, rebellious outlier who lacks agency to affect change. She wants to be, this rebel figure, but she lacks the agency to do it. But in the modern era, on the right, we might see her as a more tragic feminist hero, the voice of resistance, but tragically crushed by the regime. So she's very heroic in that sense. And then Aunt Lydia, lovely Aunt Lydia, on the left, in a Reagan era, a bit reading, a bit more kind of simplistic, propagandist mouthpiece of the regime's control. She just tells you what the regime wants you to know. But in the modern interpretation, she is more insidiously, she's a tool of indoctrination. She shows how systems use women to police other women. Okay, and we've got that insight now because we've had other waves of feminist theory that have kind of showed us that and taught us that. So you can see that the interpretations very much change across time, and if you want to get the top marks, you want to track some of those changes. Okay, and then let's look at characterization journeys. Okay, so first off then, let's look at Offred and her constrained identity in the opening chapters. So Offred is introduced initially as a passive, voiceless woman, tightly controlled by the Gilead's theocracy. And the characterization, which is a really good term to use, Atwood presents Offred as deeply repressed, physically, emotionally and linguistically, because her name is taken away from her, isn't it? Illustrating how Gilead silences and ultimately erases female autonomy. So a really good quote that she says at the start: we learned to whisper almost without sound. At the start, she's almost like a little mouse. She's been so constrained by Gilead society that she daresn't open her mouth. But how do things change? A turning point is reached here, isn't it? So a glimmer of rebellion. So through Nick, let's look. So the overview here at this point is Offred begins secretly seeing Nick, risking punishment for a taste of freedom. So the characterization here at this turning point in the narrative, it shows her shift from passive survival to quiet defiance, using desire as subtle resistance. Okay, very kind of key turning point in the narrative. Then the quote: I want to be valued in ways that I am not. I want to be more than valuable. Okay, so she's kind of gathering a sense of her own self-identity and her own feminine worth there, and that's a key turning point in the narrative, and one definitely to notice in your essays. And then by the end of the text, let's look at Offred's kind of end of the journey. Her uncertain liberation in the final chapter. So she steps into the unknown, escape or capture, we don't know, but it is on her own terms, and I think that's very symbolic. She embodies ambiguity by the end and quiet defiance, reclaiming agency through her own voice. So as we can see, she's very different from the start of the novel, okay? And a good quote for this change at the end, and so I step up into the darkness within, or else the light. Very brave, very noble kind of quote to finish it off, and it shows that moral trajectory of the character as she changes and evolves throughout the narrative. Okay, so hopefully you found that journey very, very interesting. It's very conceptual, very deep. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe and tap the bell icon so you'll never miss another Let's Learn video again. Please do, if any of this is really helpful at school or sixth form, please do drop us a comment and we'll always do our best to reply. And it just remains to say thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon. Take care.